It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The feeling of VUCA results from our sense that things are moving faster. Things seem more complex, that problems we face are more wicked. All of this is the result of the fact that there are more interconnections. Whether you're raising kids, managing a project at work, or simply trying to get a handle on the nightly news, interconnections make everything, both personal and professional, more VUCA. So why does systems thinking matter? Because while the world is more VUCA, the way we think about the world hasn't caught up yet. The way we tend to think is a technical term I like to call LAMO. Linear, anthropocentric, mechanistic, and ordered. Here's the problem. The world is nonlinear, and it includes feedback and webs of causality. Yet, we think in simplistic, linear, and causal ways. We are not the center of our world, yet we look at things through our human-centered lens. The world is adaptive and organic, yet we think it works like a machine. The world is networked and complex with a sprinkling of randomness, yet we think of things in ordered, static categories and hierarchies. Our thinking is biased in ways that don't match up with the way the world actually works. We project this bias onto the world and often ignore the important feedback the world's giving us, leading to results that we do not like. The crux of systems thinking is to learn new ways of thinking that are in alignment with the real world and yield better solutions, better innovations, and better results. I'm Derek Cabrera. I teach systems thinking at Cornell University, and I'm Chief Science Officer at Plectica, where we develop systems mapping tools. Join me to learn how to use these powerful ideas to be more effective personally and professionally. Why, what, and how of systems thinking. First, why is systems thinking so important and why does it exist? Systems thinking was developed in order to deal with three things. The first, baloney. Let's be honest, there's a lot of it around us, and being a systems thinker helps you avoid it. The second is bias. Systems thinking helps us to see our biases. We often see what we want to see, or we see the things that support our argument. This leads to thinking errors and eventually unhappiness with the results of our efforts. And the third is reality. The world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA, and this leads to all kinds of interconnected and wicked problems. Systems thinking helps us deal with this complex reality by taking contextual factors, perspectives, and interconnections into account when defining and solving problems, innovating products, or inventing new things. So the next question you have is likely, what is systems thinking? Systems thinking is the act of organizing information to make meaning. In other words, building mental models of the things we experience in everyday life. For example, if 6 blind wise men are trying to understand what is in front of them, in this case an elephant, but it could be any system, they each think that this elephant system is something different. A rope, a tree, a snake, a spear, a fan, a mountain, based on the part that they can touch or experience. This metaphor holds true for many things. Different people or interest groups are seeing things, or the elephant, in different ways based on their locality or the constraints of how they experience those things. And often, no single person is actually seeing the situation, the elephant, in its entirety. To understand the elephant, each of the men are following the same process to decide what it is. So what is systems thinking? It's 4 simple steps that we use to build an understanding of things. Number 1, we distinguish ideas from other ideas, or we make distinctions. Number 2, we organize ideas into systems. Number 3, we relate ideas to one another. And number 4, we look at ideas from many perspectives. But how do we do systems thinking? The devil is in the details, as they say. The most important thing to do is practice applying these 4 simple steps to anything you're thinking about, whether it's a problem you need to solve, an invention or innovation you're trying to create, or a system you're trying to understand. Awareness of these 4 simple rules will lead to better thinking, better outcomes, and greater self-awareness. Does this lead to misunderstandings or to ineffective solutions to problems? At the most basic level, systems thinking asks us to look deeper at how the world works and, more importantly, challenge how we think it works. Let's pretend the world is an iceberg. You, or your organization, are the boat, hopefully not the Titanic. What most people do is react to surface-level events, but what we see at the surface is not the entirety of the situation. This is true for things you encounter in your daily life. For example, you didn't close a deal with a customer. Your teenager got in trouble at school. You didn't finish your to-do list today. When analyzing a situation, a systems thinker asks, what patterns underlie the things I'm experiencing? This allows them to do more than just react to what is at the surface. It allows them to predict. When we look deeper, these seemingly isolated one-off events are often patterns. You didn't close a deal with a customer. A systems thinker looks deeper and asks, is this a single instance of a pattern? And sees that the product is declining in sales over time. Your teenager got in trouble at school. The systems thinker asks, is this an emerging pattern of behavior? And realizes there's an uptick of behavior issues. You feel bad that you didn't finish your to-do list. A systems thinker realizes this is not a one-off event, but that it's the norm. Seeing patterns allows us to make predictions. It gives us time to think about what's underneath the situation and choose a different action instead of an unconscious reaction. Systems thinkers go deeper still by identifying structures that cause the pattern. Declining sales over time is a result of the changing relationship between your product and the marketplace. An uptick in your teenager's attention-seeking behavior means his relationship to his environment and himself is changing. And if not finishing tasks is the norm, the underlying structure of that problem is the relationship between the number of hours in a day and the items on your to-do list. Seeing underlying structures allows us to better understand systems and design them to bring about desired outcomes. Finally, systems thinkers acknowledge and challenge their mental models in order to see events in a different way. The systems patterns and structures under events help us identify flaws in our mental models. A failed sale is an opportunity to learn why sales are declining. Ask why they didn't buy. Your teenager is signaling they need help with their identity and adjusting to changes. Talk to them. You're not incompetent because you didn't finish your tasks. You need to work on capacity by finding an app or method to help track, prioritize, and manage work. Seeing our mental models reframes how we think about, design, predict, and react to any event and gives us the outcomes we seek. So, next time you experience something firsthand, especially something frustrating, remember the iceberg and take a step back and ask yourself, is this a one-off event or part of a pattern? Is there a structure to this pattern? And can I challenge my mental models of this structure?
Before he was South Africa's first Black president, Mandela was an activist who spent many years alone in prison. He could have given in to despair and learned helplessness. Instead, his mindset, even in the darkest times, was rooted in optimism. And he took accountability for his behavior and treated his captors with respect, even when that same dignity wasn't given to him. You might be thinking, I like this idea of self-leadership, but I'm not Nelson Mandela. Okay, true, you are not facing the same exact issues as someone who fought apartheid. But everyone is fighting important battles. And self-leadership is a skill available to everybody who wants to resolve conflict and emerge victoriously. So what's self-leadership? It's the ability to guide yourself and accept responsibility for your values, thoughts, and actions in all circumstances without being told what to do. Now, let's be clear. Self-leaders are not outsiders or rebels. They are collaborative, inclusive, and curious. They work on teams, accept feedback, and contribute to group projects just like anybody else. But self-leaders bring a little something extra to the table. They have a strong sense of personal values, an appreciation of how their mindset matters, and a work ethic that exceeds expectations even when nobody is looking. So, another way to describe self-leadership is that it's the practice of individual accountability. I know you're not Nelson Mandela, But if you follow the practice of self-leadership and take responsibility for your values, thoughts, and actions, you can tackle and triumph over the most daunting challenges. And isn't that what life is all about? Someone who takes accountability for their performance by waking up early, practicing their craft, and demonstrating an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. Who would that be? Well, I'm American, so I think of Tom Cruise, Will Smith, Michelle Obama. These are self-leaders for sure. But let's be clear. You can be a self-leader if you're an ordinary person who doesn't live in Hollywood, eats snacks, and doesn't exercise on a regular basis. While self-leadership is the practice of individual accountability, it isn't restrictive, preachy, or unforgiving. It's not a zero-sum game with winners and losers. And self-leadership isn't about using reverse psychology and beating yourself down to eventually lift yourself up. Self-leadership is about being the boss of you, your feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, no matter who is officially in charge around you. Want to master self-leadership but don't want to be a famous movie star or give up carbs? Me neither. Here's an exercise for you. Copy the ordinary people in your life who do extraordinary things. Think about the boss who gets bad news but still manages to motivate their team. The colleague who consistently delivers great work even when battling an illness. Or the friend who has a tumultuous personal life but still has time to listen to your problems. Emulate people who take stock of their personal values, are self-motivated, and who communicate with empathy. Self-leadership isn't about living an inflexible, rigid lifestyle. It's about personal accountability so that all aspects of your life are in total alignment with your hopes, dreams, and values. Strive for self-leadership and be the bright, shining star in your organization. There were days when it felt like my full-time job was to referee fights in the office. But there was one time early in my career when a colleague explained a disagreement he was having with a coworker and how he resolved it proactively. I was shocked and asked, "Can you teach me your ways?" That's when I learned a two-part exercise called I Know This Much Is True. And I'll teach it to you right now. Here's part one. Set a timer for 90 seconds and write down everything you know to be true about life. Here are some of my examples. I believe you should be kind because everybody you know is fighting a tough battle. That's Plato. Deep down in my heart, I also know that people are inherently good. And finally, I know that a job worth doing is a job worth doing well. What do you know to be true about life? Take 90 seconds and write your beliefs down. Try to get 3 to 5 value statements that feel real and authentic. When your time is up, read your answers, reflect on them, then store them away on your phone or inside a drawer in your desk. You move on to part 2 when you have a conflict or challenge at work. When something bothers you, don't storm off to human resources and complain without first looking at the list and then filling in the following sentence. If I believe that blank is true, then what's true now? For example, if you believe everybody should be kind, then you know that no matter how much someone is a jerk at the office, it's your job to demonstrate empathy right now. You're the leader, even when it's hard. And if you think a job worth doing is a job worth doing well,
and don't always take the time to reflect on how the problem arose in the first place. A systems approach to problem solving reminds us to think about the possible mismatch between how things work in the real world and how we think they work. This mismatch between how things are and how we think they are is likely the origin point of most of the problems we face. So the question is, how can we be better thinkers to decrease this mismatch? In other words, how can we improve the alignment between our thinking and the reality of things? It may be hard to believe, but the crux of systems thinking is represented by a simple feedback loop. There are 4 parts of the loop. First, we observe the real world. This is what we experience every day. And with each experience, we build a mental model of that experience. This is where the alignment or mismatch occurs between what is actually happening in the world and what we think is happening. The mismatch leads to problems. Alignment leads to better decisions because they are more aligned with reality. The feedback loop also shows us that the process of learning and improving our thinking relies on listening to the feedback we get from the real world, often when we fail to meet a goal or have difficulty in relationships. and using that feedback to improve our mental model of how things actually are and behave accordingly. Thus, our solutions solve problems because we understand the problems more fully. The systems thinking loop encourages you to check your mental models against reality constantly and evolve them to bring them into sync with that reality. The top 3 things systems thinkers do: be aware of your mental models, seek out feedback on how well you're doing, and evolve your mental models to better fit reality. Most importantly, repeat the process over and over because it's a loop. So you have to go around and around and around the loop. Each time you do, your mental model is going to get better. And in not too much time, you're seeing more of reality, changing your mental models more, and being a systems thinker from the real world. In the signals from the marketplace, in the feedback from our customers, in reactions to things we say and do. We structure this information to make meaning of it. This meaning is our mental model. It becomes very important to understand precisely what mental models are made of. They're not merely made up of information, which comes from the real world and past experience, but are also made up of how we structure or organize or encode that information. The structuring or organizing of information is called thinking or cognition. Systems thinking is being aware of how we structure or organize information. We can summarize mental models in a simple equation: M equals I plus T. The M, or mental models, is synonymous with knowledge or meaning, what we think, ideas, conclusions, concepts. The I is synonymous with information or data or content, whereas the T, or thinking, or cognition, is synonymous with how we structure, organize, and encode the information. Mental models are made up of information and how we structure that information to give it meaning. And when we structure information differently, we get different meaning. The key to systems thinking is understanding the T, or the thinking, because the information will be variable. A problem often arises when leaders think that simply conveying information leads to their organization knowing it. If a CEO, for example, just states their vision in a town hall meeting, do the employees truly get it? Of course not. Like anyone, they have to figure out how to understand it to the point where it is intuitive, a touchstone for their every decision. Although we can transfer information, we can't transfer knowledge. So how do you structure information to facilitate the identification and creation of mental models? How do you help your team think in order to learn? Throughout many years of research, we've identified 4 simple logical rules for structuring information. They are to make distinctions and identify systems and relationships and perspectives. We call these DSRP. How do you become a systems thinker? Throughout many years of research, we've identified 4 simple logical rules for structuring information called DSRP. Systems thinking is making distinctions between and among ideas, organizing ideas into part-whole systems, recognizing relationships among and between ideas, and taking different perspectives on ideas to understand them more deeply. DSRP provides a simple set of rules for how to do systems thinking. Applying each rule to any problem enables us to explore yet unmade distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives that haven't been taken. This facilitates a thing we call predictive analytics that enable one to perform cognitive activities critical for organizational learning, like brainstorming, innovation, and even forecasting. Thinking through distinctions, systems, perspectives, and relationships provides a universal language for communicating mental models. This is necessary at any scale of an organization, from startups to the largest and most complex and occupationally differentiated multinational firms. It also allows for shared metrics on learning and collaboration across groups with different functions and different foci. In order to explain these 4 DSRP patterns, we'll look at them individually. DSRP are the building blocks of mental models, the underlying structures of how we turn information into meaning. It is this continuous mixing and matching, combining and recombining of these simple elements that leads to solving very complex problems.
Almost invariably help. The first is to break the problem into smaller, more manageable pieces. And the second is to draw a picture, because the human brain processes images much more quickly than text. Flowcharts are the embodiment of both techniques. They help us decompose a complex problem into phases and steps, and they're diagrams, not just a bunch of words. While flowcharts can be used for many purposes, in this LinkedIn Learning course, we'll focus on using flowcharts to document work processes. Hi, my name is Scott Helmers, and I've been a business process consultant for more than 20 years. During that time, I've worked with many clients and all types of process maps. Please join me for Flowcharts for Beginners, and I'll teach you best practices for flowcharting, as well as the pros and cons of various flowchart types, so you can make the right decision for mapping your organization's processes. Decades of experimentation and free-form use resulted in an enormous variety of flowchart symbols and styles. Then, in the 1960s, both the American National Standards Institute and the International Standards Organization approved a standard set of flowchart shapes. As a result, one key advantage of flowcharts today is that they use widely recognized symbols, which means that the resulting diagrams can be easy to read. However, easy to read is not a given. While there are standard symbols, there isn't universal agreement on how diagrams using those shapes should be constructed. Should they be built from top to bottom, from left to right to left, or something else? Unfortunately, it's too easy to create a really convoluted flowchart like this, when a diagram that's readable and understandable is much more appropriate. Another disadvantage of flowcharts is that they typically contain little more than text on boxes and don't provide important information about who's involved in the process, what tools they require, how long each step should take, or where to go for additional information. For example, in this diagram, who performs this step? Where do I find this requirements document? Who can help me do the work of this task? Swim lane diagrams, also called cross-functional flowcharts, are a popular alternative to ordinary flowcharts because they provide more information about who's involved in the process. The diagram is divided into horizontal or vertical lanes, each of which represents the tasks done by one role, function, or department. As a result, swim lanes make it easier for the reader to know who does what. A disadvantage of swim lane diagrams is that they often require more real estate, especially when most of the work is done by just one or two roles. The example on the screen is a swim lane version of the same process you saw just a moment ago, but instead of the flowchart fitting on 2 pages, the swim lane version requires 4. Also, because swim lane diagrams use the same shapes as flowcharts, they're typically missing the same important process information as flowcharts. Business Process Model and Notation, BPMN, is a process mapping standard from the Object Management Group that was designed to enhance communication between business stakeholders and the IT people who provide systems to support them, especially for processes that can be automated. On the plus side, BPMN employs flowchart-like symbols for familiarity. However, BPMN shapes can include numerous visual adornments that can make diagrams complex and hard to read. Like both flowcharts and cross-functional flowcharts, BPMN diagrams are visually helpful, but may not provide sufficient detail about the who, what, where, and how of a process. Value stream maps are used in organizations that have adopted lean techniques to improve their processes by finding and eliminating waste. With their focus on time and efficiency, value stream maps typically display data about delivery times, processing times, delay times, and other key process measurements. When employed in manufacturing or for other physical processes, value stream maps depict the flow of materials and goods, but the specialized appearance of value stream maps means that they are not necessarily suitable for all processes. Additional mapping methods exist that attempt to preserve the benefits but solve some of the challenges presented by flowcharts, swim lanes, and BPMN diagrams. TaskMap, for example, from the Harvard Computing Group, employs only 6 symbols and leverages the data handling capabilities of Visio to build content-rich process maps. TaskMap includes predefined data fields and specific data visualization techniques to display role names, task and frequency timing, documents and instructions, and tools, supplies, and materials. The goal for TaskMap is to provide data-driven, easy-to-read process maps. There are other mapping styles beyond the few listed here, but we won't be discussing any of them in this course. In fact, for the remainder of the course, we'll focus almost exclusively on the 2 most common types of process maps, flowcharts and swim lane diagrams. Is to remember what your teachers told you in elementary school. Neatness counts. So much of the value of a flowchart is visual that if your readers get lost in a swirl of arrows and boxes, it's unlikely they'll ever see and understand the real content in your diagram. The challenge, of course, is that most real-world processes aren't neat. They're complex, and there are lots of alternative paths, so it's much too easy to create really messy flowcharts. How do you achieve neat, easy-to-read flowcharts? This video contains 7 best practices. Number 1. Start each task description with an action-oriented verb. Passive descriptions generally don't tell readers what they need to know. Verbs like determine, select, customize, and write convey a sense of action, and readers will understand more quickly. Number 2. Use concise descriptions. Many of the least usable flowcharts I've seen over the years have had 10, 15, or 20-word descriptions on the process boxes. A flowchart is not a procedure manual. The fewer words you can use to describe each action or decision will increase the likelihood that your reader will understand the purpose of every step. Combining the first 2 best practices leads to suggestions like this. Instead of, the proposal type is determined by checking with the sales rep and consulting the sales manual, consider determine proposal type. Instead of, the proposal is sent by the clerk who works Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, consider using just send proposal. You still need to capture much of the information contained in those longer descriptions, but consider using data fields in the flowchart shapes. And if your flowcharting software doesn't let you store ancillary data, look for a solution that does. Number 3, add hyperlinks. Another great technique for including additional information in your map is to add hyperlinks to procedure manuals, web pages, and other external resources, so everything is just one click away. Number 4, organize from left to right and top to bottom. This guideline is probably the most debated among the best practices on this list. Some people prefer to draw flowcharts that read from top to bottom, either with or without swim lanes, and that's okay in many cases. However, except for Arabic, Hebrew, and a handful of other scripts, most languages are written left to right, which means that our brains most naturally follow a left to right flow. You can reduce or eliminate one source of context switching in your readers' brains by laying your diagrams out from left to right. At the end of each row, move back to the left and begin again. Number 5, use the same swim lane positions on every page. If the swim lanes on page 1 of your map are labeled, for example, Project Team, Business Unit, Executive Team, and Purchasing, don't use a different sequence on another page. Those changes may distract the readers from the content in the map. Number 6, adjust swim lane position for readability. If you're creating cross-functional flowcharts, you may be able to simplify the presentation of a set of process steps simply by moving a lane up or down. As an example, the map on the screen gets the job done. However, there is a bit of messiness with lines that cross each other. Simply by selecting one swim lane and relocating it on the page, the improvement is significant. One caution: in keeping with the previous best practice, if you do change lane positions on one page, be sure to implement the same change on all pages. Finally, use open space. Don't try to cram too much onto a single page. It's tempting to squeeze more shapes into the nooks and crannies, and occasionally one page is better than 1.5, but readability is usually more important, even if it does require an extra page. Following these 7 best practices will go a long way to making your flowcharts more readable and more useful. That is, a diagram in which part of the value of the picture comes from seeing how shapes are linked to each other. The examples on the screen are 4 of the many apps available for creating flowcharts, and in this video, we'll explore some of the features that make Microsoft Visio one of the premier applications for this purpose. We'll start with techniques for adding and connecting shapes more quickly than dragging and dropping them. The AutoConnect feature is represented by the 4 blue triangles that appear when you hover over a shape in a Visio diagram. Clicking a triangle that points to an adjacent shape automatically adds an arrow between the 2 shapes. A second way to use AutoConnect is to select a particular master in the stencil and then click the AutoConnect arrow in an open direction, and Visio fires a copy of that shape onto the page. You can also use AutoConnect in conjunction with the Quick Shapes menu, which appears when you hover for just a little bit longer. The Quick Shapes menu provides live preview of the 4 shapes on the menu, and I can simply click one in order to add it to the page. The combination of AutoConnect and Quick Shapes means I can very quickly build out a connected diagram. AutoConnect features work equally well in a swim lane diagram. I can select the master in the stencil, add it to the page by simply clicking the AutoConnect arrow, and I can use AutoConnect and Quick Shapes even across swim lane boundaries in order to complete my diagram. Next, Let's explore how to align and distribute shapes more quickly by using the dynamic grid. When I bring a new shape onto the page, dynamic grid feedback tells me whether the new shape is aligned with the bottom, the middle, or the top of an existing shape. Let's align with the middle. As I move this shape left and right, you'll notice double-headed arrows appear. When they're visible, that means the new shape is spaced from the existing shape at the interval that matches the default assigned for this page. I can do the same thing when I add a decision shape here, but notice I have all three horizontal lines visible at once, meaning that the height of the new shape matches the height of the existing shape. The dynamic grid functions vertically as well as horizontally, as you see from this circle shape, and it also provides feedback about size. Let me resize this diamond. As I resize the circle, you'll notice there comes a moment at which its height matches the height of two shapes on the page, and if I continue to make it wider, its width now matches the width of two other shapes on the page. And by the way, this sizing feedback works for shapes anywhere on the page, no matter how distant. This new process shape, I immediately get feedback that its height and width matches certain other shapes on the page, and if I make it a little bit bigger, now its width matches the width of the resized diamond. The dynamic grid also works in swim lane diagrams, and there's additional feedback about positioning within the swim lane, including knowing that this shape is now at the left margin of this lane. The process shape shows its alignment and positioning, and that positioning information even works across lanes, as you can see here. As helpful as the dynamic grid and AutoConnect are in many circumstances, sometimes they get in the way or you just don't want them. The key to turning them off is on the View tab, where you'll see a checkbox for dynamic grid and AutoConnect. Neither of those services is now available in this diagram. If you're working in a diagram that does not have these features enabled and you'd like it to be, simply add a check mark for the appropriate one or both. The next topic is glue. There are two types of glue in Visio diagrams, and while the choice you make doesn't affect the appearance of the diagram, it has a lot to do with how easy it will be to edit and maintain the diagram in the future. Ultimately, your choice of glue type determines who's in charge of line placement in your diagrams, you or Visio. If you choose dynamic glue, either by using AutoConnect or by manually gluing the end of a line to a shape, as noted by the pop-up and the green border around it, then Visio is in charge, and as you see when you move the shape around, Visio determines where the lines enter and exit each of the shapes. If you would like to be in charge, simply glue not to the shape, but to one of the connection points that are available on many Visio shapes. I've now created static glue, and as I move this shape around, you'll notice that the lines always enter and exit at the same place, regardless of the positioning. So static glue puts me in charge. For more details and examples of glue and connector behavior, refer to my Visio Tips and Tricks course here at LinkedIn Learning. Finally, if you'd like to have Visio do all of the work of creating a connected diagram, you'll need a subscription to Visio Plan 2 so you can check out the Data Visualizer feature. Data Visualizer turns data in Excel into a connected diagram automatically, as you see happening on the screen. You'll find details about Data Visualizer in my LinkedIn Learning course titled Excel and Visio, Generating Diagrams Automatically. Even without Data Visualizer, Visio makes it easy to create connected diagrams with suitable alignment and spacing. Flowcharts. To move beyond simply displaying boxes with text on them, you'll want to explore the data handling capabilities of your flowcharting software. In Visio, the key is knowing two things. First, that Visio shapes can contain data, and second, that Visio includes a special window that allows you to view and edit shape data. To open the Shape Data window, right-click any shape, select Data, and then Shape Data. The first time you open the Shape Data window, it will probably be floating over the diagram. You can resize it by dragging the edges, click the header to move it to a different location on the page, or click the header and drag to one of the four edges in order to dock the window. Because I work with data in just about every Visio diagram, I like to dock the window on the right, expand it to the appropriate size, and that way I always have the Shapes window on the left, an unobstructed view of the diagram in the center, and the Shape Data window on the right. With the Shape Data window open, selecting any flowchart shape reveals something interesting. That every flowchart ever created in Visio has 7 predefined data fields. There's a place to record the cost of each process step, assign a unique process number, and specify the process owner, functional area, start date, end date, and status. As you click into each field in the Shape Data window, you'll notice that Shape Data fields can have specific data types. For example, the cost and process number fields will not accept text. while the owner and function fields will accept any alphanumeric value. The start date and end date allow you to type a date, or use the button on the right to select a target date. Finally, the status field includes a drop-down list of pre-populated values that allow you to choose whatever's appropriate. Let's look now at a version of the same flowchart to which I've added data values. As I click through each step in the process, glancing at the Shape Data window provides details. This version of the map is much more valuable than just a set of boxes with descriptions. Now that you know the secret to adding value, what can you do with a data-rich flowchart? One option is to use Visio's built-in reporting wizard, located on the Review tab. Click Shape Reports, select a report, run, and then you can choose a web page as output, an Excel workbook, or even choose to create a new Visio shape that contains the report. Depending on the layout of your page, you may need to move the report shape somewhere else, possibly even put it on a different page. For more information about reports in Visio, please refer to Chapter 3 in my LinkedIn Learning course titled Advanced Visio, Working with Data. Can contain data, you might have additional questions, such as, can I create my own data fields? Can I see my data right on the diagram rather than needing to run reports? Is there an easier way to get data into the diagram than typing it field by field? The answer to all three questions is yes. You'll learn the basics in this movie, but feel free to explore each topic in more detail by watching Advanced Visio Working with Data here at LinkedIn Learning. To create your own data fields, right-click anywhere in the Shape Data window and select Define Shape Data. Begin by clicking the New button and typing a label for your new data field. Then use the Type drop-down to select the data type for your new field. Some types are self-explanatory, like number, currency, date, duration. Others require a bit of explanation. String, for example, is programmer lingo for a text field. Boolean provides a drop-down list containing true and false. A fixed list provides the user with a set of predefined values. A variable list is similar, but not only allows the user to select an existing value, but type a new ad hoc value if they desire. I'll select number and click OK, and we now have a new data field that only accepts numeric values, just as I requested. To give you an idea of what's possible, here are 3 examples of shape data sets I've created for specific process map types, ranging from simple, for Task Map Lite, a free process mapping template from my company, the Harvard Computing Group, to a more complex set of data for the full Task Map product, and a custom set of data for a client project in which they had a core set of data values they always wanted to see. Under certain circumstances, there was a secondary set they wanted to have available, and in other cases, there was a third set of data as well. Whether you're using predefined data fields or your own, there are many times when it's helpful to view the data right in the diagram. Both Visio Plan 2, the subscription version of Visio, and Visio Professional include data graphics which are designed for this purpose. The key is the Data tab. Please note that if you're using Visio 2010 or Visio 2013, the layout of the Data tab is a little bit different, but the buttons you need are all there. In this flowchart, I'd like to apply a data graphic I've previously created that displays the step number and process owner for each step in the process. Select everything on the page by typing Ctrl-A, and then select my predefined data graphic, and there's the result. Finally, let's answer the question, do I really have to type all of my data directly into Visio? The good news is that you don't. On the Data tab, I'll click Custom Import, and you'll see that you can choose a data source that ranges from Excel through Access, SharePoint lists, or just about any data in any database. In our case, we're going to link to an Excel workbook that looks like this. There's a field called Status and a field called Risk. Back in the flowchart, let's click Next, select the data source, click Finish, and now the data appears in the window at the bottom of the screen. The final step is to link each row of data to the steps on the page, and we'll do that by selecting Link Data, Link to All Shapes, connect the two based on the field process number, and now, for fields that already existed like status, they have a new value. The field risk that didn't exist now does. In the last several minutes, you've learned about 3 techniques for taking your flowcharts to the next level. You'll find detailed instructions for all 3 techniques in Advanced Visio Working with Data here at LinkedIn Learning. After you've applied best practices and created a great process diagram, you'll want to share it with your colleagues and in many cases with people outside your organization. However, before you do that, I have one more suggestion. Make sure your process map looks appropriate for your audience. You'll want to take advantage of the Design tab in Visio or similar features in other software. Perhaps you want to change the look of the arrows that link shapes together. The Connectors button on the Design tab lets you select curved or straight connectors, or return to the default right-angled connectors. The Design tab also includes a gallery of themes that make it easy to give your flowchart a consistent look from first page to last. Each theme includes a color palette and a particular font family, and may include options like rounded corners, shadows, or gradient fills. Themes also include variants that allow you to fine-tune the look of your diagram. When selecting a theme, you might think that your diagram should always have a polished, professional look. However, when I'm collaborating with a group of people to map a process, and we've built a first draft, I don't want it to look too polished. If it does, people often assume it's finished and don't look past the appearance to offer the comments and critique that I need. In a situation like this, I'd rather have the map look like a sketch on a whiteboard, and Visio's hand-drawn themes are perfect for this purpose. When you're ready to publish your diagram, one option is to export it to PDF. The PDF format generally preserves hyperlinks and also allows your readers to easily print pages. Another option is to export by using Visio's Save as Web Page feature. Save as Web builds a website from all the pages in your Visio diagram. All browsers provide a table of contents panel, and if you allow blocked content in Internet Explorer, you also get extra navigation features and full-text search. Hyperlinks between pages and to external resources work in all browsers. One advantage of both PDF and HTML output options is that a Visio license is not required to view the diagrams. A PDF viewer or web browser will do the job. One disadvantage, however, is that both formats are static. When the diagram changes, you'll need to export it again. The best of both worlds, dynamic rendering of Visio diagrams and viewing with any web browser, is available in the 2016 and later versions of the Office suite. You don't even need to export your diagram. Simply save it in SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business and provide a link to anyone who needs to view it. They'll see a dynamically updated view in any web browser on any device. iPhones, iPads, Android phones, Macs, PCs are all supported. A Visio license is not required for viewing, and when you save changes to the diagram, anyone viewing it can refresh the view manually or wait a few minutes and the updates will appear automatically. Creating process diagrams is important work, and it's rare that people create flowcharts solely for their own use. Consequently, it's good to know that there are a variety of formats to make your flowcharts look great and then share them in a variety of ways. When you use a flowchart to map a business process, your goal is usually to ensure that stakeholders and observers of the process can easily learn what they need to know. I hope this course has provided you with new ideas and techniques to enhance the communication value of the flowcharts and swim lane diagrams that you create. In addition, the methods I've described for publishing and sharing diagrams should go a long way toward making your process maps even more accessible. Although I use Microsoft Visio to create all of the examples in this course, you should find similar features in other diagramming software. On the other hand, if you do use Visio, I hope I've given you some ideas for ways to use the software more effectively. To learn more about Visio in general, please refer to any of my books. They're available in both online and brick-and-mortar bookstores or from my website at visiostepbystep.com. You're also welcome to explore my other LinkedIn learning courses about various aspects of Visio, ranging from using Excel and Visio to generate diagrams automatically, through Visio tips and tricks, to exploiting the Visio data handling features to add value to any type of diagram. If you're involved with business processes, please check out Harvard Computing Group's process mapping add-in for Visio at taskmap.com. TaskMap is process mapping for the rest of us. It's the simplest but most powerful way to create content-rich process maps that become the central repository for all knowledge about your business processes. I use LinkedIn actively, both as part of the Visio enthusiasts group and as a vehicle for posting articles about Visio and process mapping. I regularly monitor Twitter for questions and comments about Visio, so feel free to contact me on that site using @VisProcess. Finally, for assistance creating custom Visio shapes, templates, and diagrams, send an email to scott@visiostepbystep.com or contact me on Twitter. Congratulations on completing Flowcharts for Beginners, and I hope you enjoy using your new skills.
Woman, without her man, is helpless. Woman, without her, man is helpless. It might seem that when we read or speak, it's the words that carry the meaning. But there's a hidden structure underneath the words. Linguists call this grammar and syntax. Notice that while the information content or the text is the same for these two sentences, the meaning is quite different. If the text is the same and the meaning is different, then there must be some other factor, which is the grammatical structure of the sentence, which contributes to the meaning. So in systems thinking, the equivalent of text is the information of any kind. That includes numbers, letters, symbols, labels, any kind of data. And the equivalent grammar and syntax is the underlying DSRP structure. So based on this distinction between information and structure, let's develop a common set of terms to better understand that hidden structure, not just the information. Seeing both information and structure is critical to becoming a systems thinker. This equation illustrates the importance of information and structure to our understanding and to systems thinking as a whole. So a mental model is equal to the information plus the thinking or the structure of our concept. But the problem is that most communication techniques that we rely on are focused heavily or exclusively on the information or the content of what we're saying. And because the structure of a mental model is overlooked, the meaning of the mental model is often lost when we present or communicate our ideas. So becoming a systems thinker means becoming someone that can see both the information and the structure of a mental model. It impacts how you and the people around you understand complex problems. Through our research over the past 20 years, we've discovered that the act of visually mapping one's ideas is one of the single most effective ways to improve our understanding of complex systems. Here are a few examples of things we can better understand simply by mapping them. First, let's look at interpersonal relationships between two people. This map demonstrates a concept of emotional intelligence relevant to relationships both in and outside of the workplace. This is a basic two-sided relationship between me and you. When we have a conflict, there are only two places to put the blame, either on me or on you. To avoid a standoff, we can distinguish our relationship to create a three-part or RDS. In this perspective, we can place the blame on us and work to move forward together. Maps like these can be used to build emotional intelligence and pro-social skills in your organization. Now let's look at workflows. This map shows how you can map any process, such as a workflow. This map shows different stages of a workflow process and the parts of those stages. Before or during the process, you and your team can collaboratively iterate and improve upon the process as it changes and evolves. Maps allow you to add interacting processes or systems on the same canvas, which you can use to support organizational learning. And even things as simple as how we structure meetings at work can be mapped. This map demonstrates clear distinctions between two different processes for structuring meetings. Traditional meetings are on the left, and a new alternative meeting style called narrative meetings, which was developed by Jeff Bezos at Amazon, are on the right. All organizations have different systems, whether it's how you send invoices, develop contracts, or run meetings. But maps like these can help you better understand, advance, and improve upon your ideas, systems, and work processes, to capture them and to share them with great accuracy to your peers and your coworkers. Imagine all the misunderstandings you could avoid. Renowned educator Maria Montessori once explained that thinking is expressed by the hands before it can be put into words. We begin to explore our world, take in and assess information at the earliest stages of development. As newborns and toddlers, we use our hands and our mouths to touch and manipulate objects as part of our learning process. There are more neurons connecting your brain to your eyes and hands than to any other body parts. This is illustrated by the cortical homunculus, which means little cortex man, a scientific model of the body that depicts the proportion of neurons allocated to various body parts. From looking at Cortex Man, you can easily see the massive role that the hands and the eyes play in how we take in information and how we think about it. Cortex Man illustrates the importance of visualization, seeing with the eyes, and tactile manipulation, grasping with the hands. This shapes how we develop the fundamental skills of systems thinking. As we mature, we learn and structure complex ideas by making distinctions between and among ideas, organizing ideas into part-whole systems, seeing relationships between and among ideas, and taking multiple perspectives on ideas to better understand them. Because we can experience much of the world through our eyes and hands, we developed Plectica, a visual mapping tool that uses both. So why should you map? Because visual mapping is a tool to enhance meaningful learning, such that in the end, mappers better understand their thinking on a topic or issue. This is because constructing a map requires you to make your understanding of a concept explicit. Your ideas will be more clear to you, easier to capture, and easier to communicate to others. In other words, you'll be able to share your thinking, actually your systems thinking, with others.
That your work is valuable, even if nobody up the chain of command recognizes it. You will always give 110%, especially right now. That's all that matters. Self-leaders are fully in touch with what they know to be true, and they use their knowledge to guide themselves in challenging situations. So, if you haven't yet, take 90 seconds and write down what you know to be true. Keep that list handy, especially at work. Revisit this exercise quarterly and see what's changed. And share this exercise with your colleagues so that we can all be self-leaders together. Work, kids, elder care, after-school activities, and just the normal hustle and bustle of everyday life. Nobody comes to work looking for a fight. Most come to work with the goal of contributing, collaborating, and doing an overall good job. But conflict happens. In fact, it's natural that people who care passionately about a topic will have disagreements from time to time. Not every dispute at work leads to major drama, but even a minor disagreement between two people can be stressful. Self-leaders understand that the best way to end a dispute is to swiftly reach a healthy compromise or a productive solution. A healthy compromise is an end to the conflict that works in the long-term best interest of both parties. Forgiving, trusting, seeing the situation from someone else's point of view. When you give a little in order to find common ground, that's a healthy compromise. A productive solution is an emotionless process that reflects the best path forward for the organization. Maybe you agree to disagree and move forward. Perhaps you create a contract of shared expectations. A productive solution is all business and doesn't always feel as good as a healthy compromise, but what matters is that you move forward and focus on the work. There are 3 ways you can resolve workplace conflict scenarios as a self-leader and achieve a healthy compromise or a productive solution. First, begin with the end in mind. Before you send that angry email or confront your colleague on a video chat, ask yourself, how does this end? Can you identify a healthy compromise where you give a little? Is there a productive solution where you focus on what matters most for the business? If you see an answer in your mind's eye, even if it's just a slight inkling of a solution, you can create it. Next, go first. Self-leaders don't care if they always offer up the olive branch. They're not caught up in the politics of the fight or the drama of the moment. They reach out respectfully with empathy and compassion and propose a way out of the dispute. Finally, move quickly. As hard as it is to address a conflict right now with your feelings and ego, it's even harder if the problem lingers because every future interaction is influenced by the unresolved disagreement. It doesn't have to be a big deal if you disagree with someone at work. You can model good behavior and show others how to solve their minor disputes and disagreements before it becomes a major problem. And it's even better if you can fix your conflict before HR ever hears about it. When they go low, we go high. In times of uncertainty, self-leaders are the ones who go high and take responsibility for their values, thoughts, and actions without being directed by someone else. How do you go high when it feels like the world or even just work is on fire? You practice self-leadership when life is calm. On an ordinary Tuesday when you're bored at work and scrolling on the internet, Pull out your journal or the voice memo app on your phone and challenge yourself to answer the following 3 questions. What do you stand for and what do you stand against? When is it important to set boundaries and when is it okay to let things slide? How do you know personally when it's right to speak up? Once you answer those questions, you are ready to practice self-leadership on the small stuff to get ready for the big stuff. For example, try being a mindful listener when you disagree with someone on a minor topic. Truly hear without judgment, criticism, or interruption. If you can listen to someone in a meeting and keep your emotions in check, you can use those skills when life is uncertain and your natural tendency is to assume the worst. Or try opting out of office gossip. Change the subject, steer the conversation to something more productive, or just excuse yourself. Do the right thing now, and you'll lay the groundwork for those moments when life is uncertain and your integrity and values are truly challenged. Nobody becomes a self-leader overnight, and we certainly don't become a self-leader in the middle of chaos and uncertainty. We get there by practicing accountability and ownership in the small moments. And the time to start that journey is now. Back then, it felt like we were drowning. Unfortunately, when it comes to the state of the global economy in the 21st century, there's always a storm somewhere. Companies still expand too quickly. Investors lose confidence in leadership teams. Markets go up and down. And sometimes it feels like the workforce bears the brunt of the decisions that are made well above our pay grades. How do you take responsibility for your values, thoughts, and actions when it feels like the world is in a constant state of transition? Self-leaders do a little exercise called the pre-mortem. Think about a situation that is uncertain and causing you discomfort. Are there layoffs in your organization? Have you been furloughed? Is your partner or spouse struggling at work? Ask yourself, what's the worst thing that will happen here? Then set a timer for 90 seconds and write down your fears. So, if you were furloughed, do you worry about going bankrupt, losing your health insurance, being evicted? Get all of your fears down on that sheet of paper. When the timer is up, review those fears and ask yourself, what can I do to address these concerns today before they actually happen? Then, get to work on building a plan right now. According to Dr. Gary Klein, the act of doing the pre-mortem and creating a plan to address those potential points of failure will improve your chance of success by over 30%. Self-leaders know that the cavalry isn't coming to save them from an uncertain future. If you're worried, set that timer and write your fears down. Once you see them, make a plan to beat them. Your proactive approach to tackling problems that haven't even occurred yet, that's how self-leadership and the pre-mortem will change your life. I'm the assistant manager, so I'm in charge. Nobody respected him. We couldn't help but laugh. I wonder, how many of you have worked with that guy? How many of you are that guy? All of us have to work in the new economy where the org chart is confusing and the difference between a boss, employee, contractor, or vendor isn't always certain. When it's not clear who's in charge, we can use self-leadership to influence people to do great work and get the job done. How do we do it? First, no matter where you fall in the corporate directory, if anywhere at all, be passionate. People are motivated and moved by individuals with spirit and purpose. They see it in you, they will find it within themselves. Give me a passionate independent contractor who believes in a project's vision over a cynical corporate veteran any day of the week. Use your passion to excite and ultimately organize others to achieve the company's goals. Next, remember that all great leaders are teachers. This includes self-leaders. Even if you lack power and authority to make lasting changes in an organization, you can always model good behaviors and teach people how to collaborate, communicate, and find healthy compromises and productive solutions. Finally, self-leaders develop principles and stick to them in ambiguous environments, even when reporting relationships and corporate strategies are unclear. You may work on a team that lacks leadership, or you might have a client floundering for reasons outside of your control. But you don't have to give in to that sense of confusion. Looking for leadership? Work with integrity and lead yourself. Leave a lasting legacy of individual excellence. It's not cool to walk around expecting other people to just respect your authority. But if you're operating with character and leading yourself, people will follow. Self-leadership is the secret sauce that makes work a little bit better for all stakeholders: employees, contractors, and consultants alike. Back in the day, my father worked at the phone company. He had a desk job, which is an old-fashioned way of saying that he sat in a cubicle and he earned a paycheck to support our family. Whenever my dad needed a break, he'd go to the kitchen for some coffee. There was a refrigerator, a microwave, and a water cooler. That's where he would hear the company gossip, rumor, and innuendo. No surprise here, the water cooler gossip was always wrong. No matter the ridiculous scenario, my dad would hear some far-fetched story and get worked up for days. It was all he could think about at work and at home. Instead of leaving work at work and having fun with his family and friends, he just brought all that anxiety home with him. Now that I've worked in human resources for over 25 years, I wish I can go back in time and tell my dad to get that cup of coffee and get back to his desk. And I would teach him that self-leadership is the antidote to office gossip and intrigue. You're not my dad, but I care about you. So here are 3 ways to demonstrate self-leadership with your friends and associates when office drama is driving you to a point of distraction. First, shut it down. You can simply say, "Thanks for sharing, but I have to get back to work." Don't be rude or condescending, but be clear. Next, if you cannot opt out, try this. Ask direct, clarifying questions when you hear stories that sound unbelievable or too good to be true. Some examples are, "Who'd you hear this from? How do you know this is accurate? Can anyone else verify what you're saying?" Finally, be the change you wish to see at work. Don't gossip, don't complain, don't talk too much about things you don't know to be true. Stay focused on work and relationships, and you'll model good behaviors for your colleagues. Take accountability for how you spend your time and energy at work. Don't participate in speculative conversations that go nowhere. Stay above it all, and you'll be the peer leader and colleague that people respect and trust in times of chaos and uncertainty. Your actions won't help my dad, but you can help yourself by demonstrating self-leadership by avoiding water cooler gossip. And trust me when I say this, being a self-leader will make your family and friends a little happier. Have you ever heard the saying, "The cobbler's children have no shoes"? It comes from an old tale about a man who is so busy making shoes for his customers that he has no time to make any for his own kids. They walk around barefoot, and like most children's fairy tales, there's a lot of unnecessary shame and judgment involved. Most adults are like the cobbler's children. They go to work, collaborate, and do their best to grow as self-leaders. But then they go home, turn on Netflix, and forget everything they ever learned about how to be a functioning adult with the ones that they love. Let's do things differently, starting right now. Self-leadership isn't just a concept that we can apply to a sterile work environment. The ability to guide yourself and take responsibility for your values, thoughts, and actions is, in my opinion, the only way to get through life, your entire life. If you strive to do the right thing without being told what to do by someone else, and you treat the people you love with respect and compassion, you will have a fantastic personal life that will elevate your professional life. My grandmother always said that how you do anything is how you do everything. So when I worked in HR, the happiest and most engaged employees were the ones who behaved with consistency and integrity at home and at work. They didn't have one persona in business meetings and another for their family. They were self-leaders in all aspects of their lives. The good stuff they learned at work about communication and collaboration, they brought it home. And the emotional well-being they fostered at home, they took it to work. Want to create a thread of self-leadership throughout your entire life? Schedule some time on your calendar to take in some physical exercise. Implement family meetings to talk about topics like money and chores instead of bickering about it over dinner. Create shared family calendars and check those schedules the night before so that there's never any confusion about who is going where the following day. Take this concept of self-leadership and apply it to all interactions with loved ones. Believe me, they'll be grateful for your efforts. Is to teach it to others. I'm not asking you to get in front of an audience and teach a graduate level course on self-leadership, but when you internalize the concept of self-leadership and explain it, you will enhance your own understanding of the subject while changing the lives of the people around you. That's pretty cool. So, how do you teach self-leadership to a colleague or a friend? First, go slowly. The worst advice is unsolicited advice. If someone really needs your help in becoming a self-leader, they'll ask. When someone does ask, share a story. Telling a story is one of the most powerful ways self-leaders like you have to influence, teach, and inspire. Here's my self-leadership story. Years ago, I worked at a company called Pfizer. I was bored and unhappy. One evening, I was traveling for business and eating Starburst for dinner and drinking a Pepsi at an airport. I had an epiphany while reading a magazine. Pfizer could dominate the marketplace because it was a well-run business with clear goals, stated values. The only person in the world accountable for my happiness was me. But I would never be happy until I understood myself and defined my core values. That night at the airport changed my life. Now I live a life where I'm 100% accountable for my experiences in the world. So what's your self-leadership story? Think about it. Write it down. I bet there's someone in your life right now who is anxious to hear it. It's time to share it and teach others how to be accountable and in control too.
As there are more neurons linking your brain to your eyes and hands than to any other body parts. This means that our brains receive sensory information primarily on these areas of our bodies, the hands or tactile, and the eyes or visual. We developed a visual language for doing DSRP that is amazingly simple, but can be used to visually map any problem or system or situation. The only prerequisite to using this visual language is that you can draw a rectangle, a line, and an eyeball. You can draw these maps on a whiteboard or paper or even use Post-it notes, and this helps people learn how they think systematically about anything they're thinking about. So let's get started with this simple D, S, R, and P visual grammar. For D, or distinctions, we simply make a rectangle and identify or label it with words, images, or whatever. You make distinctions by creating new cards, Post-it notes, or rectangles. Cards can represent ideas, people, tasks, or objects. For example, you can distinguish between two marketing strategies by creating two distinct cards. For S, or systems, we are dealing with part-whole structures. So all we have to do is make new cards that are part of other cards or contained inside them. For R, or relationships, we're thinking about how things are related to each other. So we can use a line with or without arrowheads like this. Notice that this simple rectangle card and line process can be mixed and matched or combined. So you can distinguish what a specific relationship is by adding a card or shape to the line like this. And you can zoom into that distinct relationship and add parts to it like this. For P, or perspectives, we're looking at cards and relationships and their parts from a particular vantage point, through an important lens, or from a point of view. To do this visually, we add an eyeball to the cards that are the point and sometimes use color to show the view. In these maps, ideas become objects that you can move around and manipulate. And this tactile and visual manipulation of your ideas advances your understanding of the entire system you're working with. And most importantly, your visual maps can be used to model any idea, no matter how simple or complex, and no matter the subject, in organizations that have divisions or departments of some sort. So the question is, how can a systems mapping tool help you with your work? Take the example of an engineering team and a customer. Our mental model shows that there is a relationship between them. But what is it? When we take the time to consider the relationship between and among things, we can better understand them. If we distinguish the relationship by making a card we call product manager, we can see that this relationship is actually the function of the product manager. The engineering team and the customer are related by the product manager, the person that is responsible for guiding the success of the product. Now, we need to better understand what a product manager does by thinking about qualities that he or she may possess. A good product manager has instinctive qualities and deep skill. Additionally, a product manager needs to understand many perspectives on a product to do their job well. Remember, a perspective is made up of both a point and a view. For example, an engineering team's perspective of a new software product may be, is it useful? Which directly relates to the user experience they design. The engineering team is the point from which we are viewing the new software product, or the view. Most of our thinking errors come from thinking that the point is the same as the perspective when it's not. The point and the view together make up a perspective. Combining a view with multiple points can create multiple perspectives in a cognitive jig we call perspective circles, or P circles for short. Peace circles remind us that any idea or thing has the ability to view some other idea or thing. And often those things or ideas are seen from multiple points of view simultaneously. So now let's look at the product from the point of view of the customer. The customer isn't involved in the design process, but they do care if the product's useful. Their view of the product also includes a consideration of its price point and whether it saves them time. An additional perspective we could add is sales. A sales team might be primarily concerned with profit margins, but also usefulness and price point as they attempt to close deals. Finally, the product manager is also a point whose view would include all the parts of the product and all the other perspectives. Changing the point of view changes the perspective. Because the DSRP structures are content agnostic, we can look at anything or idea from any point of view, not just sales or engineering, customer, or product manager. Anytime we explore any idea, we can take multiple perspectives on it and create a shared language about the mental models we hold. 130-pound Bernese mountain dogs and 2 obsessive-compulsive Australian cattle dogs. Feeding has always been a tedious, time-consuming, mess-generating chore. And as a systems thinker, I needed to break down the process while also taking multiple factors into account in order to really look at this everyday problem as a system. There was a few things I observed. The first was that the big dogs would bully the little dogs, and that would cause the little dogs to get less food, and then they would beg for more food throughout the day. The second is that I wasted a tremendous amount of time walking around getting the bowls, the water, the scoop, the food, which were all in different places in the kitchen. The other thing I noticed is that burners have really large noses, and we had relatively small bowls. So they would push the bowls across the floor as they were feeding in order to get at the food. This also created a mess and metal on tile screeching during the feeding process as their large noses pushed the bowls around the floor. In addition, the bowls weren't stackable, so we had 4 water bowls and 4 food bowls, and I would have to carry them around as I was trying to get them ready for the feeding. I had to fix this problem. And to improve this, I thought of a few things. 1, move the food bin to a better location and tie a scoop to it. 2, purchase 8 large stackable bowls with sticky grip bottoms. And 3, devise an order of operations and placement of the bowls that decrease the infighting amongst the dogs. By taking a systems approach to a simple daily problem, I cut the time to feed the dogs by 1/3, and there was less mess, less cleanup, less chaos, and no conflict. What did I do differently that you can also do? Pay attention to reality to see how your mental model is flawed or misaligned. Make new distinctions. Look at different configurations of parts in the system. Find and articulate new relationships. And lastly, take different perspectives to truly solve the problem. So whether it's a simple household problem or a complex social problem, systems thinking can help you solve it. Of both IQ enhancing and EQ enhancing skills. Developing a person who possesses both emotional intelligence and IQ skills requires a distinction between cognition or thinking and metacognition, the ability to reflect on and understand how you think about things. Systems thinking is metacognition that specifically attempts to reconcile this mismatch between our mental models of the real world and how things actually are in the real world. As building blocks of systems thinking, D, S, R, and P are the cornerstones of developing metacognition. So let's go through a few ways to increase your EQ through metacognition. Be aware that everything you experience is a mental model that approximates reality. This helps us to know that even though we might be experiencing it in a way we think it is, that might not be quite the way it actually is. You need to understand both the distinctions you make and also the emotions and motivations that influenced you to make them in the first place. Remember that the parts of any system that you see are influenced by your perspective. This means that you also recognize that thoughts of others are also influenced by their perspective. You also need to see that there are many ways to organize and relate ideas, and your way is not the only way. Finally, you need to differentiate between your thoughts, or cognition, and your feelings, emotions, and motivations. Then you can understand how these three things shape your mental models and therefore your behaviors. This is important because increases in metacognition are highly correlated with one's emotional intelligence. The more you develop metacognition and emotional intelligence, the less susceptible you are to manipulation of your mental models, and the more likely you are to realize your own human potential. And this kind of metacognition and EI has many payoffs. As we know, emotional intelligence is now one of the most sought-after qualities in education, civic life, and business, as it is now a greater determinant of job success than the IQ types of intelligence. Relationships and perspectives, or DSRP, enables you to construct or deconstruct systems of infinite complexity. But getting started with DSRP is actually easy. Pick something you're thinking about in your daily life and ask yourself 4 simple questions. Number 1, what are the distinctions I'm making when I frame this issue? Number 2, what are its salient parts? Number 3, what are the relationships among these parts that I'm not seeing? And number 4, what different perspectives could I take to better understand this issue? Over time, if you apply these 4 questions over and over again to anything, you'll become cognizant of the structure of your own thinking and gain a more robust understanding of any issue, greater mental flexibility concerning it, and be better positioned to address it.